you're going to hear more about a very interesting form of light, one that's called visible light disinfection. And this is obviously very focused on healthcare, so it's a new way to approach the subject of disinfecting hospitals. And I'm actually one of the inventors of this technology, so it's part of my love here. So again, we have all the standard kind of AIA disclosures for the continuing education, to the sign-in form in the back. If you sign in, we'll be sure to get you your credits. And again, all the material here is copyrighted, but we're happy to provide you with a PDF of the slides afterwards if you'd like. We know that sometimes it's hard to remember everything, or if you just like to have a reference copy for later, we're happy to share that with you. So really what we're going to focus on here is something that's very germane to the healthcare, which is healthcare-acquired infections. And then you're going to see how that bridges together with lighting to create some unique capabilities. And it really emphasizes together collectively what Abhay is saying is how lighting can be used for more than just lighting. And here's, of course, the learning objectives. The key thing that I want to highlight to you is to talk a little bit about healthcare-acquired infections, just to set up the problem and help you appreciate what your customers are thinking of. After all, the people who write all of our checks are the ones who fund healthcare and build these buildings. So we want to understand what there is in their life on a daily basis, and you'll see how we can help them with that. And then we'll bring that through to specification-grade light fixtures that are designed to help disinfect the environment. So, just as a moment to start as a kind of introduction here, all of us are consumers of the U.S. healthcare system. So we're all equals, we all experience this, and without being pejorative in any way, Obamacare has forced all healthcare providers to become better providers of services at a lower cost. That's the end objective here, and that's just kind of highlighted. Right? And this is done through a series of policies and initiatives. So of course, any of us who have our insurance companies paying bills for us, anyone who receives Medicare dollars, anyone is being supported by these different policy initiatives to make people provide services better and for less money. Now, of course, the way to ultimately measure this is to actually grade everyone. And so now hospitals are being graded on the quality of care they provide, either directly in terms of performance or indirectly in terms of readmissions, hospital-acquired conditions, things like that. And these scores are meaningful. And this is actually a clip from the Chicago paper. It's a couple of years old, but it's very real. Many of our biggest hospitals in the city were fined millions of dollars because they were providing care that was not as good as it needed to be. And so when we talk to our customers, our healthcare customers, speaking to the subject of hospital-acquired infections speaks directly to their bottom line and their attention and interest. And so I put this out just to kind of hopefully give you both a perspective on healthcare-acquired infections and also to share a little bit of humor, right? We all are aware that lawyers are a part of society, and we are a very litigious society these days. But believe it or not, healthcare-acquired infections actually affect about 1 in 20 patients. How many people here know somebody who's had an infection at the hospital? Right? We've all experienced this in some way or another. It's very serious, and for the person who gets the infection, it's of course very real. And taken across the country, it represents about 1.7 million healthcare-acquired infections a year, with about 100,000 deaths. So again, this is a very serious problem when we look at it across the country. And there's actually a financial cost associated with this. Typically, every time a person gets infected, the hospital loses about $23,000 off its bottom line. Can be more, but can also be less. But still, that's a big number when you think of what the total cost for the system is. Total cost across all there's real money there that hospitals are losing through excess cost or reduced reimbursements. And without making this too graphic, I had to find pictures that describe an infection, but without showing, of course, all the gory medical details. So, there's really 4 types of infections. That helps to set the frame for all our discussions today. And one of them is surgical site infections. People go in for knees and hip replacements. We're living longer, we don't eat as well, our bodies wear out, so you get knee and hip replacements, right? These are large infections, are large wounds that are used to implant the device, and you can get an infection that can be very serious. There's also catheters, there's central lines, and there's ventilators. Anything that puts a portal of entry into the body allows bacteria to come in. Believe it or not, your skin is really good. Your nose, everything prevents stuff from getting into your body. But when you put a needle into the skin, that now creates what they call a portal of entry. That's how bacteria gets in the body. And that's how you can get an infection. So just to give you an appreciation for this, one I've shown down here on the right is the largest form of infection. That's a surgical site infection. So I mean, think about that for a second. Whenever you go in for a surgery, most of the infections that occur when people go in for surgery. So that kind of tells us where in the hospital we want to look to try to protect more. As I mentioned, this is a very expensive problem for hospitals. This is a kind of a run the calculator type number. It includes direct costs because hospitals don't get reimbursed for those services. They have to provide care for the patient to cure them of the infection. That's money out of their pocket. They also get fined. And then there's additional costs that kind of run in here. So that's kind of a total dollar value. And here's a reference if you like to see these things. But again, the point that I put out here is that when you talk to your customers about how you can help the facility prevent infections, you're talking to their bottom line. And I think these are some, kind of salacious news clips, but there's some that are very important here, and I'll call your attention to this one here on the lower left. This is the head of the CDC, Dr. Arjun, and I can't pronounce his last name, so I just call it Arjun. But he's very famous. Anyway, look at this quote. We've reached the end of antibiotics, period. That's an important point. How many folks have taken their kids in for an earache, and the doctor wants to give them an antibiotic? But the earache is viral in nature. If you give someone an antibiotic for something that's not bacteria related, you build up their immune system to the antibiotics, so the antibiotics are less effective. And the way we've always treated people for infections, historically, is we pump them full of antibiotics before they go into surgery or after they come out for surgery. And that was great when penicillin was invented in World War II, but now we have a bunch of organisms that are resistant to antibiotics. So the reason I bring this up here is there's now a real focus on preventing bacteria from getting into the person's body in the first place. How can we stop bacteria from getting into the body rather than treating it after it's already in the patient? And so hospitals are doing a variety of things, one of which, of course, is improving hand washing. I don't know, let me kind of show of hands here. Anybody here, I can take a guess at what the average hand washing rate is in the hospital. The average, the number of times they wash their hands when they're supposed to. Feel free to guess. You can't be wrong. 50% is a good guess. It's actually about 45%. So about 45% of the time when people are supposed to wash their hands, they actually wash their hands.
And you wonder what happens in the restaurants, right?
It's exactly commonplace.
That's
so
like 10%.
Right, now here's even more here's even another way to put this in context. Hand washing was invented by a gentleman by the name of Ignaz Semmelweis back in the 1850s. It was specifically related to maternity wards. There was a lot of children dying at birth. They were dying because they were getting infected. And he, through the scientific process, discovered that by washing their hands with chlorinated soap, they could actually reduce infections. And that started the modern era of hand washing. Well, we knew that 150 years ago, yet it doesn't happen. It's human behavior. So there's a variety of other ways that people are trying to help reduce infections in hospitals. But the one that kind of comes to mind is, of course, hand washing. So now, when people do that, they always forget about the environment. They forget about the room that people live in. They kind of take it for granted. In fact, you'd be amazed to know that the average surface disinfection rate is the same as the hand washing rate, which tells you that it's people motivated. When people come into a room, if you've ever been in a hospital room with one of your family members, they come in once a day and clean the room. I said with my wife when she had her knee replaced, they would come in, they would empty the trash, they would swift the broom around the floor, they would spray a couple counters, and they would leave. And I'm just thinking to myself, my goodness, think about all these other surfaces where there's stuff. And once you get into this business, trust me, you'll never go to a restaurant and look at it the same way. You will never go to a hospital and look at it the same way. It's very awakening. So again, the way bacteria, of course, get into a person's body is they sit on surfaces or they sit in the air, and people touch the surfaces or people have an open wound, and the bacteria get in the body. So this is strictly an environmental problem. And as we'll talk about here today, there's different ways to address that, specifically with lighting. So when we talk about the role of environment in healthcare-acquired infections, some more kind of fun stories here. So the first, these are some, of course, little photos of different organisms under magnification. The point that I make here is that many of these organisms, you can see, can survive for months on surfaces. Forget norovirus, that happens to people on cruise ships predominantly, but I can tell you a personal story. I was in a hospital doing what I do here, and I went up to my buddy's cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for recreation for one weekend, and I got up there and I absolutely had norovirus. And the only way I got it was either that or Buffalo Wild Wings. because that was the only spot I was between the hospital. I thought of Buffalo Wild Wings to get lunch and went to my buddy's cabin. So I got norovirus. It's out there. And this is how you get it. I didn't contact it from a person. I got it from being in a room. And many of these organisms can survive for months. That would be like you or I walking through the Arizona desert without a canteen. I mean, think about it. You take some of these organisms and you put them on a surface, and they normally just dry up and die from lack of moisture. But they have response mechanisms where they realize they're in a harsh environment, and they go into a shell, and they stop consuming energy, and they survive. So this is why people are very concerned about the surfaces in the environment. And of course, I found this even more interesting. I get all these research journals and publications, and I saw one here that said, our hospital floor is an underappreciated reservoir for transmission of healthcare-associated pathogens. And being a guy, the first thing that came to my mind was the 5-second rule. I mean, how many people have you decided to see people drop something on the floor and then eat it, right? I've watched it happen. I've been part of the club, right? Yeah, well, it goes for 5 seconds, right? Of course it makes sense. The floor is filthy dirty. You put these tubes in people to either feed them or give them, ventilator, right, or whatever. And half the time, my wife was in there, she told me to take the tubes out, they'd put it in the bed underneath the covers. What a filthy, dirty place to put this, and it goes back inside the person, and all the bacteria goes there. So all this bacteria is sitting in the environment, right? What can we do about that? Oh, here's another one, right? There's a slow motion photo of how things spread when somebody sneezes. I've got the technique down, right? If you ever see somebody, it should be the sneeze technique, right? Because of course you don't want to sneeze on your hands, because then of course you touch someone, right? So, and of course I found this very interesting. Again, in the US, we're very fortunate we have a lot of private rooms. Other countries don't have so many private rooms, so they put these great curtains up in the middle here, right? And you can see these curtains, I'm sure those prevent lots of bacteria from going back and forth. There's another photo. It shows what happens when you touch a person. So imagine if a healthcare worker has gloves on their hands, and they go up and they touch a patient because they're treating and examining them. They then took this person's hand and they put it onto a petri dish. I remember these from high school biology or something, right? And it makes bacteria grow on it. Now look at that left. That's all the bacteria that was on that person's hand after they touched a person. That tells you why hand wash is important. Now on the right next to it is the same hand, but this time they touched a surface in the room. Supposedly the room had been cleaned. They came in there, somebody touched the surface and touched the petri dish. Look at all that bacteria. Yes, it's less, but there's still bacteria there. And that's the importance of, this highlights the importance, again, of proper hygiene in the environment. And here's a little bit of math. I appreciate if you like this kind of stuff or not. The key point here is that when a patient goes into a hospital room, they may acquire an infection, they may already have it. And then you do a study that says, well, if this person had an infection in the room, and someone else comes in the room, how likely are they to get an infection? Right? It's how we call it the room lottery. If the previous occupant in the room had an infection, how likely are you to get an infection? It's almost 3 times as likely for you to get an infection. That tells you that these patients are leaving something behind. It's got to be in the environment, right? So this is where the title of the talk is generated from. It's what if we treat our building as a patient? No one would ever let a patient, a human being, fester with this kind of bacteria on them and be treated with this kind of poor medical care. But yet we treat our building this way. We don't pay attention to disinfecting it properly. We don't pay attention to treating it and designing it properly. Although I will say now, I think there's a real focus in many of the projects that we're working on. They actually have infection preventionists in the design phase, working with the design teams to design the room so that the sinks are located in the right place, the hand soap dispensers are in the right place. Lighting is a separate consideration, but they design the room specifically to minimize the transmission of bacteria. And in fact, there's an article in LDNA, I think it's a month or 2 old here, specifically on this topic, authored by yours truly. And we can provide copies, or you can get a copy of it. And so just to give you some parallels, when we talk about hand washing, well, the parallel to that, if you think of your building as a patient, the parallel to that is improving surface disinfection. So you wash your hands, you wash the building, right? And then this thing here called antimicrobial stewardship, that's a really complicated medical way of saying making sure you give people antibiotics when they're supposed to give them. So if you give people antibiotics when they don't need them, you create resistance in the body. Also, if you give them the wrong antibiotic, because you don't know, different antibiotics work differently on different bacteria. And what I found even more fascinating when I talked to several doctors about this, some of these antibiotics, this is not the stuff that our kids get for a year. Some of these are nasty antibiotics. People can die from them. people's organs shut down, their tendons can come off of their bones. I mean, it is scary stuff when you put these antibiotics in people. It's something you don't take lightly. So giving the right antibiotic to the person is an important part of infection prevention. Well, same thing as proper surface disinfection. I was amazed when I followed some of the people in the hospital around who they're called EVS, environmental services. They do all the cleaning of the rooms, and they have a little cart with a dozen different types of bottles on it. They're all different disinfectants. You know, when I'm at home, I go and I reach underneath the cabinet and I find Clorox bleach, and they go squirt, 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 right? Well, there's different disinfectants to kill different organisms, and they have to let it sit for a certain amount of time. And that's the way you disinfect the environment. Well, that's a whole other science, right? So again, this all follows through. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this for you here, but just to give you that theme of how thinking of your building as a patient gives you an opportunity to treat it differently. And so how can we improve environmental hygiene? Well, there's really kind of four methods, I think, here. The first is very brute force. Just put more people. You talk to anybody at the hospital, they'll tell you the first thing is they're cutting costs. They cut people out of the cleaning rooms. Because it's not for medical care. More doctors equals more procedures equals more revenue. Need more nurses to take care of people. Those are all those ancillary costs. The one area that always gets cut is environmental services or janitorial services. So then when you have to take the limited resources you have to put in better policies and procedures to make sure these folks are properly trained and understand how to do the work that they're doing. And then you can actually test the compliance to see if they're actually cleaning surfaces. There's an interesting little test that people have, that a little fluorescent marker is invisible to the eye, but it comes up under black light. So they'll mark the surfaces with this little gel, you can't even see it. The supervisor will come by with a little pen light, little black pen light, and see if it's been cleaned or not. So that's the compliance monitoring. And then there's all sorts of new technology out there to disinfect surfaces in the air. They're called automated disinfection or whole room disinfection systems. And it's a way to disinfect the environment without having to put lots of people in the way. And you're probably familiar with some of this already, depending on what you do in healthcare. You may have used some of this already. Everybody has air filters. All the operating rooms have these HEPA air filters that change the air in and out and take bacteria out of the air and circulate it around. There's also different copper surfaces. You may have designed some facilities with copper surfaces on door plates or other high-touch surfaces. On the environmental protection side, people will come in with sprays, and they'll spray the room, and the spray will kill bacteria. And then finally, we'll talk about visible light, and that's really the subject of today's talk. There's also other technologies. We call those episodic technologies. Episodic means they come in and they do it, and you kill a bunch of bacteria, and then you leave. You do it for an episode. Continuous means it runs continuously. You run the air filter 24/7, so it's always taking bacteria out. So I'm going to spend a couple slides on this. I'll try to get through it briefly. This again is for depending on the audience, it may be more or less relevant. The ideal disinfectant is one that kills a lot of bacteria every day. So you could imagine the ideal disinfectant would be something that sprays out hydrogen peroxide. That sounds really nasty, and it is. It kills, and it's used to sterilize rooms. If you ever see a room where there's like an Ebola patient, when they'll take the Ebola patient out, they'll come in and they'll spray hydrogen peroxide because it kills everything. They have to block the vents off, they have to shut the door, they have to tape it off. It's very serious stuff. That'd be the ideal disinfectant, right? Because it kills a lot of bacteria, right? And it kills it 24/7. So this kind of shaded area here is the total bacteria you kill, right? This is like driving, 55 miles an hour for 10 hours, right? You drove 550 miles, that's what that square represents. Now, of course, you can't spray hydrogen peroxide in the room all the time because people have to be in there. We have to use all these rooms. So we make a compromise. They come in every day and clean the room at 10 a.m. or sometime, right? Or you can clean it after every case. Again, this is just an arbitrary time. But the point makes is that you come in and you disinfect at a very high rate for a very short period of time. So you kill a lot of bacteria, but only that short period of time. So what that suggests is there's an opportunity to disinfect a different way. What if I disinfected at a lower rate, but I did it 24/7? So now this shaded area, this blue area, you can see it's about the same as this pink area, right? I can get almost the same effect, but I don't do it as quickly. It's just another way to disinfect the environment. And what that does is it fills in the gaps that you create. Whenever you disinfect every kind of 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever, you leave gaps where there's no disinfection going on. This is a way to supplement what you're already doing. So without being too pedantic here, you can imagine a day in the life of a room. You've got some bacteria here. You've just finished a case, you just finished an operation, and there's a lot of bacteria in the room, right? It's all being shed. You come in and you disinfect, and it kills all the bacteria, right? Now you leave the room, and you come back and do another case, and the bacteria all regrow. And you do this day after day after day, or case after case after case. The bacteria levels cycle around, right? Well, now what if we did something where we disinfect the environment continuously? You'd see the bacteria, eventually you'd get rid of all the bacteria. All you could do is just continually take bacteria out of the environment, like with a HEPA air filter. You take all the bacteria out eventually. But that's not the case because the rooms are always in use. People are coming in the room. So what happens is, it takes more bacteria out. And think of it like this. It's sort of like the room is sort of like a bucket of water. There's a hole in the bottom, water is leaking out. That's the bacteria you're killing, right? And guess what? Somebody's running the water faucet. They're adding bacteria in the bucket. And eventually it kind of comes to an equilibrium, and that's this point here. Right? So now the point that I'm trying to make is if you put these two things together, you're still going to do all the normal cleaning you do in the hospital. But what if you do something else? What effect does that have? Well, let's start. So we turn on our disinfection. We're running our HEPA air filters. We come in, we clean the room. We saw that 2 seconds ago, right? All the bacteria out of the room. Now, you're applying continuous disinfection. So it's disinfecting. The next time you come in to do a case, there's less bacteria there. So the next time you start a procedure, the next time you start a case, the room is clean. And that's going to equal better patient safety. And of course, this just follows through the rest of this, and you see the benefit builds up over time, just like we showed you in the last slide. So by making the room cleaner each time you come in, eventually it gets down to a point where there's substantially less bacteria on a daily basis than there was there before. Oops. So if you put these two together, what's the benefit? I like pictures, so I see the shaded area here. And this purple shaded area is the benefit you get from using both forms of disinfection together. So when you talk to your customer, you tell them, hey, look, you're doing everything you normally do. This just adds to that capability. It doesn't take stuff out. It doesn't, you don't stop doing what you're doing. It just continues to make the room cleaner and safer for your patients. And so when I think about this technology and think about continuous episodic disinfection, it's really apples and oranges. The two are very different. You use them together. The point is that episodic disinfection is great if somebody has if there's an outbreak or if there's a terminal application. So again, someone like an Ebola patient. I've been in hospitals where they have them. And when the patient's done with that room, you absolutely want to come in and nuke the room. But you can't do it every day because it takes their amount of service. It's not safe. So instead you have another alternative at your disposal, which is to continuously disinfect the environment. I mean, think about some spaces like the emergency department. These rooms are in use 24/7. They can't shut it down. They can't say, that's it, no one's coming in the emergency department, we've got to clean it. That'll never happen. So this gives you a way to disinfect as well. So, my daughter helped me pick these pictures out, right? Which is better, episodic or continuous? It's not either, they actually work together. So that's the way we want to think of it. So when you talk to your customers, you say, hey look, I have something else that can help you clean and make the environment safer for your patients in addition to what you're already doing. So with that, that's more of the science piece of it. Now we'll talk more of the technology piece of it. How would you implement that? So this is really the subject of it. This is visible light. So this is where the lighting piece comes in now. How can we disinfect the environment better using visible light? Well, in fact, there is a form of this available today. It uses light. If you're into the lighting stuff, this is the wavelength, 405 nanometers. So it's above the UV. So if you're familiar with UV, this is UV, and they put a little C after it that tells you what section of the spectrum it uses. That's called UVC. And you may not remember UVC, but you probably know UVB and UVA because you put on sunscreen when you go out. Beautiful summer day, right? So that's what it's doing. It's blocking those UV rays. Here, this is visible light. It's visible because you can see it. And how does it work? Well, here's an example of an operating room. On the left is the room under white light. You have to do your case. You have to have normal white light. But into that white light is mixed some of this blue. The blue is kind of like the active ingredient. Now, when people leave the room for the day, you take advantage of the fact that they're leaving the room, and instead of white light, you give it all blue. Now, you wouldn't try to do a case underneath there. It's still safe. It looks a bit like a disco club, so everyone would truly enjoy coming in and giving their dance moves. But it's its own color. And again, the way you do this, if you're in the lighting side of things, there's this 405 nanometer only in indigo only mode. And then there's 405 nanometer plus green, yellow, and red, and of course you know that makes white light. So you've got something here that kills bacteria, plus all the other colors to trick your eye into thinking it's white. So you can do both your normal procedures and disinfect the room. And how does this work? Well, again, as I mentioned, you have the light in the ceiling, and it's killing bacteria in the air, and you disinfect continuously. That's this here. And without making this a science class, the way it works is inside the bacteria is some molecules that absorb the light, and it creates the same chemical reaction as if you poured bleach on it. So you're creating bleach in the organism, same reaction, just using light. And of course, this disinfects the environment, prevents bacteria from making it into patients, and there's a lot of laboratory and clinical data supporting this. So of course, when people hear about the technology, the first thing they always ask is it safe for people? And being a medical device person and actually have a background in ionizing radiation, I can certainly talk a lot on this topic. The simplest thing to think is, let's compare it with overhead light. This is overhead sunlight. So if you were to walk outside on a beautiful sunny day, that's the amount of irradiance or light per wavelength you'd see. And here's what the visible light disinfection uses. So it's actually less than overhead sunlight. So relative to something people experience today, it's safe. Now if you say, well, okay, I'm not sure if I like that, here's some other alternative standards. These are standards published by the IEC and also by other commissions. One is called ACGIH, American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists. Very proud to remember that. And also ICNIRP, International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. These are all folks who are very into the safety, that's acute photoretinitis to the eye, and also skin erythema, reddening of the skin. So those safety risks are out there, and this technology is safe against those standards. And the technology itself actually started as a young girl's PhD thesis. Actually, they started at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. You may not have heard of them, but you've heard of Joseph Lister as in Listerine. That's where he used to teach. So they have a long history of disinfection science there. And she actually started publishing on the technology in 2008, and they have a ton of these refereed publications and proceedings, and the science of it's really kind of well vetted. And then in 2015, the technology became commercially available. And so I mentioned as in an operating room, you can use the technology to kill bacteria in the air and on hard and soft surfaces. Most things don't do that, they do one or the other. You have some chemicals, you come in, you spray on the surface, you kill bacteria on the surface, but the air is an issue. It's in the operating room. If you're familiar with those big kind of circular dishes that they have over the table, depending on the angle that they tilt the dishes at and how close they are to the center, that influences the wound contamination on the patient. They've even done studies that show that. Very fascinating. The guys had a little, if you kids use the Xbox, they have these little sensors that the kids can do their dance moves, and it translates it into the game. They were using the sensor to map out the positions of the lights, and they could show how the changing the position of the light influenced the bacteria on the table. So again, a real problem for folks. And of course, because it's visible light, it can get wherever you need to for disinfection. So if you're looking at visible light today, you can see light scatters off the walls. There's light everywhere in the room. That means you're getting disinfection there. There's a gentleman in the lighting business about this, and when I described what happens if a patient does a knee or hip replacement, and they get the infection down to the implant, they have to put the person back on the table, they have to open them up, they have to take out the implant, they have to sew them up, the patient has to sit in and out, they sit in a room for 30 days while they get back to the infection cleared in their body. They have to go back into the room and have the implant reimplanted. So this friend of mine in the industry said, it sounds like a do-over. I said, that's exactly what it is, and it's a very painful and expensive do-over. Obviously painful for the patient, and it's a six-figure settlement for the hospital. Oh, and then, sorry, just to end by saying that in that environment as well, believe it or not, these operating rooms are under constant turnover. Again, my wife and mother were both nurses for many years. I found it amazing to realize that these rooms are turned over every 15 minutes. Major cases are done, and they have 15 minutes to get the room cleaned and set up for the next case. It doesn't leave you a lot of time to do a lot of high-power disinfection, right? And again, if you're in the lighting side of this, this is how a lighting room or operating room is typically lit. There's different zones of illumination. Over the center of the table is more light, and of course less light as you get to the edges. That's what these colored boxes here represent. The yellow boxes represent standard 2x4 light fixtures that make the light. And this is your foot cable plot. And here you can see for a regular operating room, on the left is 6 lamp T8s. If you do operating rooms, it's kind of a standard way to light the operating room. Here we'd be replacing those on a 1-for-1 basis with LED. So here you can see you use less power, about 40% less power. You're kind of probably familiar with that, using LED lights, it saves energy. But then you can go and do a 1-to-1 replacement and put in the visible light disinfection. And what that does is it uses about the same amount of energy. It gives you a little bit more light, but it uses about the same amount of energy, and now you're disinfecting the room. So you went from fluorescent to LED back to about the equivalent amount of energy, but now you're disinfecting the room. And you lay out the lights exactly the same way. This is a 625 square foot alarm. And that's how the fixtures look, kind of very standard dimensions that you use in operating rooms. There's also some additional flavors that are available these days. And when you use this in the operating room, one question we always get is how do you control the light from the white to the blue? Well, it's very easy. You can do it on a wall switch, or you can use it with very high-tech sensors. You know, this is lighting, so it can be automated. Right? You're probably doing building automation projects or things like that. So here you have a sensor over the table, and it's actually an ultrasonic sensor. And you use that because you want to make sure you get all the fine motion. Many times they're doing these neurology procedures where their arms, or they're maybe doing an eye surgery, where they're doing it under a microscope. Their arms practically don't move. They might use their hands like this the whole time. So you don't want the lights going off when they're in the room. So you use that over the table. But then, of course, you have the standard passive infrared sensors around the rest of the room. So you get people coming in and out of the room. Pick that up and you keep the lights in the right mode. One of the things they're always concerned about is people making mistakes. That's called compliance. And if someone has to flip a switch on or off, that means they can forget to do it. And this prevents you from doing that. So it's all automated. It doesn't take any people to perform. And so, of course, I'll just start to wrap up here by just showing you that this stuff is real. So we showed you, kind of some of the science behind episodic and continuous disinfection. We showed you how you can address that with visible light. Now we'll talk about how you actually kill bacteria. And again, without making this, trying to make this a little fun here, there's a few handful of bacteria that are responsible for most infections in the healthcare environment. And they're actually collectively called the escape pathogens. I didn't know what that meant until I went through and saw E-S-K-A-P-E. I thought someone was very clever. And I thought I had discovered fire when I realized that was how it was spelled out. And of course, there's all the other nasty things. You've probably heard of E. coli in food, right? So there's all these different types of bacteria. So when people say it kills bacteria, that question should have like a little asterisk next to it. There's lots of different types of bacteria. And this is some evaluation data. This actually is a patient room. This was in the Glasgow Royal Infirmary. And what they did was they measured the amount of bacteria in the room at the start of the experiment and the end of the experiment. And then they turned on the lights, and they saw this big dip in the amount of bacteria. And then they went and they figured out that was about a 76% reduction. Just by turning on the lights, they saw 76% less bacteria in the room. And then over here, this shows you all the different surfaces they tested. And because the lines are roughly parallel, that means you're getting roughly the same amount of disinfection throughout the room. And that's important because you could cheat and say, yeah, I'm going to get this one surface really well. But there's the whole room. The patient doesn't have the luxury of just touching one surface. And particularly when you talk about bathrooms where bacteria can come out, it's obviously a concern. So there's lots more information here. If your customers ask, you can show them this. This is the first study done in the U.S. This is at the Medical College of Wisconsin. This was a waiting room in their GI clinic. So, I did exactly what you tell your kids not to do, which is crawl around the floor. I was doing it in a suit at 9 o'clock at night, no less, trying to measure bacteria in the room and the amount of light and so on. Very fascinating study. Anyway, here you can see the end result. Just by running the lights in the room, there was a more than 70% decrease in the bacteria in the room, just by running the lights. So we took the technology and started to migrate it to operating rooms. This is the first operating room study done. Here you can see the light, normal white light. Here's the blue light mode. And you go around, and this is a fascinating science experiment. There's little petri dishes. You pop the top off and go squish. And then they take it, they put it in an oven, and they count bacteria after they're done. So you do this for a month. Very, a lot of work. And here you can see all the amount of bacteria in the room. It starts off here. This is a room without indigo clean. It's another room without indigo clean. So there's two rooms here, or continuous environmental disinfection, excuse me. And this is the amount of bacteria in the room. And then you install the visible light disinfection, and you see a reduction in bacteria. Now, what was fascinating was when you pull this all together and pull this data together, you see that within the room where you have the light, you see a substantial reduction in bacteria. Almost an 88% reduction, yet the room was in use 54% more. They used the room more and saw a ton less bacteria. That tells you that you're doing something good for your patients.
Mm.
What was really fascinating was the room across the hall, which was used as a control for this experiment, showed a substantial reduction. Right? How could that possibly happen? After doing a couple of these, what we realized is it's cross-contamination. It's just like when you go in the house and your mother tells you to take off your shoes because they're muddy and filthy, dirty, don't attract blood in the house. That's what this is. People were going back and forth between the rooms, and there was less bacteria for them to transport from one room to the next. So putting this in there, you can see the kind of secondary effect and benefit it has for the facility. And the academics love the technology. Lots of people are publishing on the technology, doing research. So if your customers ask for evidence-based research, there's this available. And then there's also additional applications that are now in use. So we talked about operating rooms, but another area that's of a high concern is something called the patient bathroom, because they're interested in an organism called Clostridium difficile, or C. diff. This can survive for a year. It's highly infectious, and when one person gets it, they typically pass it on to other people on the floor. And so just by installing simple downlights in the bathroom, you can kill this organism. Something you can design in the facility. Also the emergency department, as I mentioned, when people come into the hospital, I was amazed to learn that about 90% of admissions to U.S. hospitals come through the emergency department. And when you come from outside, you don't know what people have on their skins. You don't know what state they're in. So all this bacteria is being transported to the facility and deposited in these exam rooms. And then it can get transported to other places in the facility. Very scary. You don't want to know, believe me, right? So again, another place where you can potentially deploy the technology. And one place that actually has done this is Henderson Hospital in Las Vegas, Nevada. They went all in on the technology. It's all in their operating rooms, C-section, trauma triage rooms, their emergency department. It's a fundamental portion of their facility design and how they provide a cleaner, safer environment for their patients. In fact, this is their CEO on the local news when they were dedicating the facility, and he in fact mentioned specifically to their patients that they were deploying this technology to make it safer and cleaner for them. And so we'll just end here, right? Summary, the first thing is when you talk to your building, your customers, help them believe in prevention. It's cheaper than the cost of litigation and damages. As we mentioned, people are getting sued, there's big money going around these lawsuits. And visible light disinfection is a way to improve your environmental hygiene that's complementary to your current efforts. It's safe, doesn't contain ultraviolet light, it can be operated while people are in the room, and it doesn't require people to operate. And because it's LED technology, it has low lifetime costs. It can run for 10 years or so, right, without needing additional bulbs. So people love that aspect of it. And that concludes the course, right on time. And leave that to you.
Questions?
Yeah. So it's a lot to take in. It's very different than what most everybody's used to in front of the lighting side, so appreciate that. Like I said, we'll have the slides, we have my card here available, right? We can certainly support you as you talk to folks about it, but I'm happy to entertain any questions you have now, or so of course after Abhay's talk.
So for example,
Good.
Yes,
so for example, if you have a DSL-free facility, you use hydrogen peroxide to clean the room, compared to the light.
Right.
So which one is more powerful?
So the hydrogen peroxide, nothing's going to beat these episodic technologies because they come in and they disinfect at a very high rate for a very short period of time, but people have to leave the room.
Correct.
So that's the trade-off for it. So again, it's a complementary effort. Again, as a consumer of the healthcare system, I would absolutely be glad to know that they used ultraviolet light or hydrogen peroxide or some additional techniques to clean a room after there were some highly contagious people in it, right? That's absolutely what you want to use. But as a way to improve the level of disinfection on a continuous basis that doesn't require people, something like this light provides you with a complementary approach.
Okay, so it's back to the cooling power and the duration, right?
Right, exactly. So in fact, the one slide I had would talk about that. If I could kill 100 bacteria per second with ultraviolet light, I might kill 10 bacteria per second with visible light. So you kill it less quickly, but you can run it 24/7, right? So the total bacteria that you kill, which is you multiply the two together, the total bacteria is where you kind of win out in the end with the visible light.
And the mechanism is the same.
The mechanism is, the kind of biophysical mechanism is a little different. The end result is that the bacteria are dead.
One more question.
Yeah,
So for the white mode,
Yeah.
it's still killing the.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so it's under even operating. It's
That's
still,
exactly right. So think like this, and if you appreciate the electronics of it, it's 100 watts of white, 50 watts of blue,
yeah.
and then you go 0 white, 150 blue.
Got you. So that when you're not operating, it's just more intensity.
That's right, it's more blue. You got it, exactly, see, you got it.
So you got 3 times the blue then?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why it's not, you know, if it is so effective, why it's not common? That's why.
Say again?
Why it's not commonly used or approached?
It's a new technology, everybody wants to understand it and, you know, kind of validate that it works, they wanna see other people using it. You probably run into this, you know, nobody wants to be the guinea pig, right?
Right.
But, so we've gotten through a lot of this work, and then, we are seeing now that it's, and we've had discussions with Carol way over, we expect at some point this will become a standard. People will just put this in all their operating rooms. We have hospitals now that are doing 20, 30 ORs that are looking to do this in all the ORs.
So only in the ORs, not in the patient rooms?
So it's only in the patient bathrooms, we're getting a ton of interest. The patient bathroom was something, separating the AIA from the commercial piece. Well, if you want commercial now, the downlight, a 6-inch downlight, kind of similar to what you probably have here, right? It was something we just released about a month or 2 ago for the patient bathroom. So that's available now, and we think that's gonna go gangbusters. That's gonna be a huge.
How many hospitals has this been installed in?
So we've got about a dozen here in the US right now,
Yeah.
and we probably have, I don't know, 30 to 50 that are in the process of deploying it.
And you could get that list available to
We,
us?
so we have a very strict rule, we don't name drop, we actually take people who actually install the lights and have a reference, we're happy to get references, but we do it from places where we're installed and publicly declared, right? So, as you know, with the construction projects, it takes time to get through it, so they're in the phase of either, you know, speccing it in,
And then
or,
Cliff, I'm saying the ones that have been finished.
absolutely, we can get you those
That's what
references.
I'm talking
Yes,
about. We
of
don't
course.
care to know where the competition is.
Yes, but I mean, we're always very respectful of everyone, because, you know, receptive infections is of course very serious for these hospitals. Nobody wants to be thought of as being a dirty, unsafe facility, right? So when they put something like this in, we've actually had hospitals say, well, if we put this in, someone may sue us because we're not putting it in this room over here.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, I would never have thought of that. I would have thought, I'm doing the right thing for my patient by putting it in the operating room. I'm helping them. Well, we didn't put it in this room over here, someone could get upset with us. We don't put it in all our operating rooms. You know, they put it in their total knee, total hip, all their ortho rooms, but they don't put it in the other rooms that they use for minor procedures. So there's some, you know, kind of details there that come up, but it's, you know, certainly becoming much more popular.
But we do have facilities now that are looking at deploying this technology as a competitive advantage to their competitive healthcare systems in the market. So essentially, right now, I'm working with a big facility in Rochester, New York. They're building a brand new pavilion. They're spending about $265 million on this facility. And their precise aim is to promote the fact that they have this continuous environmental disinfection system as a method to attract patients away from the competitive health systems that they're competing against. So they're actually utilizing this as a way to entice you to choose their facility over a facility that doesn't have this technology.
As a brand positioning.
As a brand
A value
position.
addition.
That's exactly right.
There is certainly an element to the healthcare landscape which is more aware and more competitive now with regards to infections. Again, I think back to my situation when my wife had her knee replaced last year. I made sure I looked at the hospital's record for infections and what they did to address the subject of infections. It is very publicly declared on these websites for these hospitals now what they're doing to address the risk of infection.
Have you, sorry, let me jump in. Just one quick question. Has there been any movement in the field where we say, look at it holistically, not just ORs and patient rooms, but, you know, create vestibules of light? That's something we've done on another kind of project, a wellness resort. We create vestibules of light where you're able to, with this indigo technology, you know, take care of the bacteria and the germs that's going to come in with you. It's like brushing it off you.
Yeah,
You know, with
right.
that light. Is there anything that's in the works in the industry that you know of?
No, not today. We're folks, and the way people deal with infections is the hospitals have openly acknowledged that there's bacteria everywhere in the hospital.
Right.
They've chosen to focus their resources, candidly, on certain areas of the hospital where the risk of infection is high and the consequence of infection is high. So that leads them to like the operating rooms and the patient room, because the patient spends a lot of time there, and in many cases their wounds are opened. In some cases, their emergency departments. There's a handful of places that they specifically focus on, and as we all know, the waiting areas are filthy dirty. But hospitals admit that they can't keep those places continuously clean.
That's my question, but why not? Because
Yeah.
if that system works, that graph that you showed,
Yeah,
you know,
Right.
the sawtooth, you
Yeah.
could use that system-wide, right?
absolutely, and that's where it becomes, as I said, a kind of deployment of resources. The system could be too expensive then to put in every waiting room, so
Uh-huh.
they go back and they think, all right, well, this is not the cost of a light, okay, so I'm gonna put it in an operating room, I'll put it in the areas where it's kind of high impact.
So
And
Cliff,
they-
what is the delta between a regular system and a system like that?
Yeah, so for the operating room, it's about a factor of 2, so about twice as much. For the patient bathroom, it's about 50% more. Kind of give you a flavor of reference. And, you know, I think that's really something that's sort of get people's attention. And any building owner, when they look at their rate of infections, if they look at their operating rooms, for essentially what is a rounding error in the total budget, if they step back and really think about it, you know, it might cost them an extra $200,000 on a $200 million facility.
Uh-huh.
They think, well, this is rounding error, right? You know, this is math rounding error. I mean, as Lou pointed out, there's facilities now that are getting aware of the technology. They needed to see some of the studies. You know, as I mentioned, this technology was launched commercially in 2015, so within 2 years, we've gotten multiple partners to do multiple studies. And it just takes time to get those studies done and get that information out to people to where they say, oh, wow, somebody else is using it, it works, we'll spec it in. It takes a year or 18 months to get it built, and then there you go.
What about the replacement? How often will these lights have to be replaced as opposed to the LED lights, which will last forever?
About 10 years, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great, I mean, you hit a great point, which is for the customers, they're already experiencing the technology every day with LED light. So their regular facility lights are LED, and they know that those last for, 10 years,
Yeah.
and they love that. The fact they don't have to go up there and do maintenance on it, no
But what
bulbs.
about these UV?
Yeah, this visible light here,
Yeah.
it's good for 10 years, so it's designed to be just the same as a
Oh.
regular light.
It's LED, so they're just LED
LED.
components with a very specific phosphor that creates the color. So it works just like an LED light. In fact, it works in 2 modes, so it's actually a 2-circuit system that does white
Okay.
like you would normally have, that's disinfecting, but then also in the blue mode when people are not in the room. So it's actually operating almost.
It's more time.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand,
Of course.
what you're offering are, like, you have this system that has all the sensors and this 2-mode modality. So you design and implement that. And for the bathroom, you're just similar, it's a whole system that
That's
you're
right, yeah, so
selling?
it's a regular 6-inch downlight, but the beauty is in knowing that people have a variety of occupancy sensors probably in the bathroom already. This can tie into the existing occupancy sensor, or it could use one that we have commercially available.
And, like, for a bathroom, you say you need.
You need like one, you
generation.
need 1 or 2, depends on size. There's a 5x10 bathroom, you need 1, 10x10 you use 2.
No.
Would you have a blue light for the bathroom?
So the
Yes.
bathroom, yeah, so it starts white, and then no one's in there, so it goes all blue. And so, unless your bathroom is a library, you're not gonna be there very often, right? So most of the day, it's gonna run all blue.
Most of the library.
I make that joke. I make that joke because having a house with my mother-in-law and my daughter and my wife. The bathroom is one area I can go for some peace and quiet.
I know this is further down the line, but I can imagine, like, even a household.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
we've already
Kitchen
looked at it.
applications, food preparation
Yeah,
areas.
just talk about like one downlight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
the
the-
shelters.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the way we started the technology was really to say, where can we go where it has the most kind of compelling need, and then also in the medical industry, you got the most talented people who can evaluate the technology. So kind of third party, there's lots of talented third party people at hospitals. And of course, if someone told you that it was in use at, say, the hospital for special surgery or something, right, and it's used throughout there, you would say, wow, they're using it, it must be good, as opposed to, well, 5 people are using it in under cabinet lights in their home, right? So it's the harder path to climb, but in the end, it's more rewarding because it's the right way to do it.
So you were mentioning, so timing is always a big issue, especially when you're talking about circadian health, duration of
yeah.
time is
Great question, I mean, Abby's gonna talk about this,
Yeah.
yeah.
But one of the things that you were showing on one of the charts that you saw, like a 78 to an 84% decrease of bacteria in the room after 2 days of use of the
Right.
lights being on. So what's the rate of killing disinfection
The efficacy.
what's the efficacy of killing bacteria,
So that-
disinfection?
It's a very perceptive question. So the way we frame the claim on this is that if you turn the lights on and let them run their normal cycle for 24 hours, which is 12 hours of white and 12 hours of blue, the next day you'll see a 70% or more reduction in bacteria.
Okay.
So, and then that cycle keeps going, and essentially it's kind of like a burn-in. you know, and you get to that point, and then you're set.
So what about that 15-minute transition that they have when they're turning over patients in a room? What's the percentage rate that they can kill bacteria if they have 10 minutes to use the lights?
Yeah, so to be sure, this is a product, when I tell people its efficacy, it's measured in hours, not minutes. And so you're going to disinfect some bacteria. The studies we've done show, like, if you just take a petri dish and you just put the light above it, shows us that we can get rid of 100% of it in just a couple hours. So after 15 minutes, you'll get, you know, probably 10-20% of the bacteria gone, right? So it is some benefit. The way I would try to frame it is during the day is you come in the morning, you have your first case, and there's probably some bacteria left there. By the time you get to lunch, it's going to all be gone. So you kind of help it.
So how did you land on 4 or 5? Were you just trying to get as close to the ultraviolet spectrum without going there?
That's another very perceptive question. So think like this, inside the organism is this hydrogen and carbon chain of molecules. And the way these things absorb light is it's kind of like a spring. The spring vibrates back and forth like this. And if you have the frequency of light that matches this rate, it'll cause it to fragment. So it's actually a molecular absorption spectrum, to kind of be a little more technical there. But it's very precisely determined. And so 405 works, whereas 420 doesn't. In fact, some of the work I did in my previous life was like 412, it doesn't work. So we have these LEDs spec'd pretty tight, and actually when we say 405, that's kind of a broad term. It's actually a little different than 405, and we found that through kind of our own trial and error.
Would you call that molecular what?
It's called molecular absorption.
You're saying 4 or 5 singular wavelength, or you're talking about spread over plus or minus 2?
That's right. So the center wavelength is spec'd at technically about a little higher than 405, and the tolerance is just a couple nanometers on it. And so we keep that tight. Now the benefit of this is you have multiple LEDs in the fixture. So we have 24 blue LEDs in the fixture. So you get a population. So if one of them's at 406 and the other one's at 409, it kind of averages out. And the LEDs themselves have a little bit of a tail to them, so it all kind of centers in around 407 to 408.
LEDs tend to degrade over time.
That's exactly right. So we took our LEDs and what we did is we did a bacon on them, and essentially after the normal kind of bacon is a 30% decay. It's called L70.
Right.
So our L70 is 10 years, and we take that 30% and we throw it back into the margin of the system. So it's a 30% margin built into the system. So that way we can ensure that after 10 years of use, it's going to still do what we claim it does.
But it's not the color that changes, it's the output that changes in that time. So that's a lot of people think, would there be color shift over that period of time? It doesn't shift in color, just intensity.
How do you verify, how do you qualify that? How do you ensure that the spectrum doesn't shift?
Great question. So there's 2 ways to do it. One is the individual chip itself is pure blue. And so most LEDs color shift because the phosphor coating degrades because of thermal mechanisms. So there's no phosphor coating. It's a pure straight blue LED. So the only thing that would happen would be the chip itself would fail. And then secondly, in order to have the light fixture change appreciably, you'd have to have all 24 LEDs shift the same direction, kind of in the same time. So by having multiple LEDs, even if one fails, you should still be good.
It's almost like a pixel.
So how long this has been around?
So that's a great point. So as I mentioned, the young girl started her PhD thesis in 2005 with this. She started publishing in 2008, and then they put it in the Glasgow Royal Infirmary in 2010, and we commercialized it and launched it in 2015.
So 2 years in the United States.
2 years, that's correct.
Is
And
it
it was
proprietary?
installed for 2 years?
Correct. Yeah, we had installs at the medical college and other
Is it
hospitals.
proprietary?
This is highly
That's
proprietary. We are very fortunate. It's
So if any government project that 3 equal will not be able to spec your product.
there's no equal on this. This is a one name, no equal spec.
I was going to ask that
Yeah.
offline because that's a big impediment to it. Yeah, how are you going to spec it if we can't have 3 names on it?
Or government project. And
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'd be interesting to know. So yeah, this is it's interesting you mentioned that. We didn't think of that. Of course, we're thinking of the larger commercial pie, right?
yeah, but it makes sense for hospital, for government hospital.
Yeah. Right.
If it is,
Right. How do
or
you
if they
spec
want
it
to
in?
be promote, try to.
Well, they could certainly spec alternative forms of disinfection. It wouldn't be a visible light. It would, like when you spec a light, I mean, you probably wouldn't have 3 names because it's a common technology, right?
Not
But-
doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Okay, one last question.
Yes.
In order for the blue light to work, do you have any recommendation of the wall surface or the flooring surface to make it more effective?
So the surfaces it works on, we've tested a variety of clinical surfaces. In the hospitals, they have stainless steel, they have formica, they have vinyl, so it works on all of those surfaces. We've never done any look at any specific paint or anything, because we don't want to suggest to our customers that they have to repaint the walls with specific paint. Ultraviolet light, there are manufacturers who use ultraviolet light who suggest to the hospital to use certain types of UV reflective paint. I couldn't imagine being a hospital maintenance person having to find this paint. It's got to be super expensive, and you've got to have it available whenever you want to go repair a room, you know. So.
What about porous versus non-porous surfaces?
Very good. It works on curtains too. Remember those curtains I showed
Yeah,
you?
that's what you're saying.
It actually works on curtains. They actually have measured bacteria off the curtains. So, and it's fascinating stuff. Yeah. Good. Well, I want to interest of time for Abhay. I'll stay around later, and I'm not tomorrow morning, so I'm here tonight. So, if you have any questions, please. I'll be happy
Do you
to.
have your business
I do,
cards?
right over here.
Yeah, we have.
Information is all here,
Yes.
so
Please
just
fill out
some procedure and, yeah.
Yeah, the attendance, so you can get your credits.
Yes. So some procedure and protocol that when the course finishes, please sign in your AIA numbers, membership numbers, etc. Also, we weren't planning on it, but the conversation has been so great. Thank you, Cliff.
Yes.
That maybe after this, if any of you have questions, I have some wine. We can stick around and
Enjoy it, right?
talk more.
Well, work hard, but also have some time.
Thank you.
Fine. Well, of course, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Cliff. That was fantastic.
I'm excited to create this too.
We were lazy. We didn't take the ladder to aim the knife. Using a stick to aim the knife, but I think I'm most of that. So, great. Thank you all for coming. This next course is talking about the latent properties of light and their impact on the health and wellness. It's just a little bit about my background. I'm an architect by training and a lighting designer by practice. So we're a research-based design practice here, so we've been doing a lot of research over the last 10 years before it became fashionable to talk about lighting for health, and then kind of went into alternative routes of looking at color therapies and chakras, and then try to see how we can streamline it into mainstream architecture. So some parts of this conversation may sound too out there, hippie-ish for you, but we'll kind of connect it with some scientific information. The purpose of me doing this is essentially to work with architects in mainstreaming information that has existed for thousands of years into our profession, right? So just by a show of hands, how many of us are architects or connected to the design field? Great. And connected to the design field.
Yeah, that would be us too, right?
Of course.
Just not our.
Great. So when we were setting this up, the idea was to have two polar opposite conversations. One was very specific about, biomolecular, what is the word that you said? Absorption and how they shatter like that and all those wonderful things. And I'm going to talk more about fit city wellness standards and what are the color therapies out there. We're also going to talk about a little bit about circadian, not too much. Because to me, some of you may know, I also teach at the Lighting Research Center, which was at the forefront of doing the circadian research. I think it's very good. Everybody should do warm light at night and cool light in the morning. Great, super. But I think it's become almost too commoditized with, we're going to do a dynamic white and that's going to solve all the world problems, So I will talk about it a little bit, but the purpose of this presentation is not really about circadian rhythms and how circadian disruption will do this to you and you're not going to be able to sleep and you're going to fight with your girlfriend and all this. We're not going to spend as much time with that. We're going to talk about things like EMF, RFI, wiring, control gears, pulse width modulation, what it does, what do the LEDs do, in ways that nobody's really, probably not too many people are looking at it. one quick thing before I start. I was telling you, Cliff, earlier that we have a patent on this light. We call it the Ahimsa light, which is the Gandhi light, the non-violent light, where we pinch out, very interestingly, pinch out certain nanometers with pinch filters from the spectrum, right? So that the bugs don't see the light.
Ah, yes, right, okay. Fascinating,
Right?
yeah,
So
right.
what you were saying is the flip of it,
That's
which
right.
is, which is
Right.
like a bug zapper.
Right,
You know, that you're going to
Right.
zap them with the same wavelength that they were looking at.
yeah.
You know, so I just found it very interesting. I was sharing that with Justin, who's been working with
Very
me on that.
fascinating.
You know, anywho's, so I'm just going to jump through these slides because you've seen this before on his presentation as well. So 8 parts to a conversation today. I'm going to try to restrict myself to 40 minutes, and then that means that'll put me at 8 o'clock, and then we can have questions. This first part is our roadmap for human-centric lighting. Basically, you'll see 3 colors, not because I'm thinking Mardi Gras, but each one of them denotes a different agency. So the beautiful light green is the DDC. Everyone familiar with DDC? DDC New York is the Design and Development Corporation of New York. They're a government agency. They build everything in New York, pretty much. Okay? So they have 4 pillars, you know, which are listed there, A, B, C, and D. Then what you see in orange is our research, AWA's research. And what you see in the pink magenta is the Fit City or wellness. You know the well building standards? How many of you are aware of well building standards? Quite a few, right? And then there's Fit City. Fit City is about cities, how do they get fitter, yeah? So what we did was that there was so much information out there, you know, DDC was talking about something, Fit City is talking about something, wellness is talking about something. Of course, there used to be a thing called LEED that, you know, people are talking about. There's Green Globe, all of these other entities that have contributions to the overall, you know, our human-centric zeitgeist. And we said, you know what, let's put it on paper so that we at least have all the variables that we can then research, right? So you would see that there is, interestingly for you, the 3.1 is DUV, which is DPUV.
This is fascinating, I've never seen this before, this is fascinating.
All in the same price of, you know, same.
Exactly, yeah, all, right.
You don't have to pay extra for this. So then we summarize that into, you know, what we're going to be talking about today, and what the application areas could be. You know, so health and wellness, of course, sustainability, resilience, which became very topical after Sandy, and of course with everything that's going on even now. And the 4th thing is equity. Equity is really how do you get the community to participate in the efforts that you're making, so that they are part and parcel of the overall process journey, right? The topics here in health and wellness, we have essentially 7, where visual light, which is, you know, what we call light for foot candles, for seeing. That's the first one. Circadian light is a non-visual pathway, which of course is important. Then we talk about lamps and fixtures, essentially the material choices and the LEDs. Then, because we don't have 3 hours, so to compress it into an hour, I'm going to jump through some parts, but the electrical system is going to be about control gears. And then the one thing that we all forget to talk about is how are the systems cleanable? How do you maintain them? You know, Cliff, you also spoke about that a little bit. Going into mental health and then biophilia. For us, the A6 and A7 are very strong anchors, because we have been doing research on our own here in this space with light therapy and you know, using either pulsing light or superchroma light, and seen some amazing results. So now can that be tabulated and statistically proven? No, I'm not a pharmaceutical company, so I can't really do that. I can only talk empirically that, what are the observations that we've had. Talking about the aspects that connect with sustainability for us in lighting. And again, remember that the colors are connected to the four bodies that, the four pieces of information that we were studying. Right, and then of course a very topical thing now is resilience, and then equity, which led to our healthy lighting studio here, which has been a great journey, as Cliff and I were talking earlier, and how we are motivated to use our skill sets to contribute to healthcare. Right? I'm just going to jump that. So the first part of it is the visual lighting. We know what this is about. Everyone's been talking about it forever. All the lighting designers are talking about light levels. There've been conversations where your whole profession is, weighed by the amount of light that you can provide. It's like how good is the book is basically governed by how heavy the book is. So it loses all its heft, and that it's not you lose all the evocativeness that it can create. But that's part of our visual light paradigm, right? There are views, there's vitamin D, and there's of course color. That's visual light. We are in the time of circadian rhythm, the catalyst for change. Some of you, I would say that actually, for the architects, are you familiar with the IPRGC? And I know the lighting guys are. Okay, so I'll just go over this. Basically what happened in 2001 was somebody came forward and said that it's not 2 cells in the eyes, but it's actually 3 cells. And if I keep my eyes closed, the light still has an impact on me, right? It's called a non-visual pathway. Non-visual pathway, right? So it's not giving you, I'm just trying to say it in very simple terms. There is a whole amount of other information that goes with it. But that was a game changer for everyone. That was like, wait, some of us went, yeah, we always suspected that. Even when I'm sitting outside in the sun, I have my eyes closed, but I still feel it. So what's that about? So then this person came in, they did this, they spoke about it, and it was a game changer for a lot of us, because now we started looking at light not just from a visual pathway. How much light can you give me? How much can I see? In the 50s we said 100-foot candles. After the OPEC crisis in 72, we said 50. Then in the 80s we made it 30. Nobody asked why we kept reducing, from 100 to 30. But it was the visual light dialogue. The sidebar on that is that the light level standards were being sold by energy companies. They wanted to sell more energy, so they said use more light. Then it was like they didn't have enough, so they said reduce light. But there was this whole conversation about visual light, which was, to me, always a moving target, because to me it's enough light when I can do my task in peace and function. You don't have to give me a foot candle number, because that's always connects me to a dosage that is counter to our human nature, which is that 1 foot candle is light from 1 candle 1 foot away. That's how people used to read and study, not thousands of years ago, but as much as 100 years ago. So why is it that I need 50-foot candles or 100-foot candles, or I can go to 100-foot candles and in 30 years come down to 30-foot candles, and nobody says a peep about, wait, you went to 30% of the light as a standard and you're still all okay? So I'm saying that now you can do it in 15, 10, but that's the conversation about visual light, right? That's foot candles. It's been hijacked, it's been utilized in many different ways, but we are now talking about what's the game changer, which is the circadian rhythms, the catalyst for change. That is, now you're talking about non-visual pathways and how does light actually impact you. For those of you who are interested, this is how it works. There's a non-image forming pathway that goes through your suprachiasmatic nuclei, which stands right in the center, and essentially contributes to working with your pineal gland and creating melatonin. Simple formula, right? So I'm just going to show that again, right? It's a non-visual, non-image forming. You can't see images, you can't see what the person looks like, but it essentially goes through your master clock, which is the suprachiasmatic nuclei, connects to your pineal glands, which those of you who do alternative medicine know that the basis for a lot of things that happen to your body. But it takes the input from the SCN, which is the suprachiasmatic nuclei, and secretes melatonin, which is a sleep hormone, right? Sleep or awareness hormone. So, you know, whether it's a sympathetic, parasympathetic move, or flight or fight, you know, all of these are also connected with the overall cycle of melatonin and related hormones. And I say related hormones because that's a bigger conversation. But circadian light differs from the generally conceived definition of visual light in that it refers to the effect of lighting on the human circadian system as opposed to light as a stimulus for the human visual system. Simple, right? So the effect of lighting on the human circadian system, what does the word circadian mean? Circa, dian, right? So 1 day, goes around 1 day, so it's circadian. It's your cycle through the course of the day. And basically, circadian light is based upon the potential for light to suppress melatonin synthesis at night. Okay? Now, it isn't possible to know the setting of one's clock without obtaining physiological info. There is a lot of research that's been done about teenagers and school-going kids. Give them this kind of light in the morning, that kind of light, as a general rule. I'm not saying doesn't work, but it's really critical to have a physiological analysis done before obtaining the information that will be used to work with your body clock. Yeah, we have been looking at options of implementing this architecturally through wall or ceiling panels. The conversation here is that the light has to reach your retina, so it can't just be around you and it's not really, that you're doing this and you're not really looking at it. So there is that connection as well as that, yes, you can do the dynamic color, you can give changes in the spectrum, but it's really the delivered light on your retina which becomes the critical part. But we say proceed with caution because a general rule saying that, this will work for everyone is not true. We feel the research shows right now that that's actually accurate, that we should have the physiological information of the analysis done. It's the same as, I don't know if any of you work with essential oils, but if you use lavender on one person, it makes them calm and you kind of make your connect with the haha. Or it really upsets another person. And I've seen that happen. I'm like, wait, that's supposed to calm you, but you're like so hyper, So, if he said that, besides air, vitamin C, love, that, those things work for everyone, water, but I can't really say that this kind of light is going to work for everyone all the time. I'm just going to jump that. What does circadian disruption do? Some of the things that it causes is breast cancer, right? Obesity, because it kind of works with, disrupts your hormones, and sleep disorders. There are different types of sleep disorders, but essentially it's because of a lack of synchrony between the master clock and the peripheral clock, right? So you guys understand the difference between the master clock and the peripheral clocks, right? The master clock is inside the suprachiasmatic nuclei, SCN, and then the peripheral clocks are everything else, whether it's your digestive system, your reproductive system, and all of those other things, right? And it's basically what happens in jet lag, right? It disrupts your sleep, your digestion, and your alertness. And then over sustained periods, these disruptions contribute to cardiovascular anomalies and accelerated cancerous tumor growth, as it's been shown by the study done at the Lighting Research Center in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 4 years they worked on it with nurses in the Albany area, women nurses who had a higher incidence of breast cancer because of their disrupted sleep cycle. Okay. Any questions? So how do you reduce circadian disruption? We have we're talking about lighting design solutions that improve nighttime sleep and daytime wakefulness. What does that mean? Does it mean just give them more light, or does it mean that give them spectrum? But I say that's all connected to the function that's being served at that period. If the person is working, you can't say, well, I'm going to give you this light and you're not going to be able to work for an hour. You just got to chill and take in the light. That won't work. So how do you actually work with the architecture to create solutions that contribute to reducing circadian disruption, right? Artificial windows, horizon lights, we found them useful in fixing circadian disruption. And then I'm just going to quickly go through a few projects. This is something at the Kennedy Center, which was called the Monsoon Club, and where we were trying to work with a tonality of color and also see how we can not really reset your circadian clock but reinforce your circadian clock, if you would, with the choice of colors. Actually I'm going to come back to that later. This one here is a project from a long time ago. This is before, this is in 2002 when I just started the practice. Here we are talking about a 24/7, what's it called, call center? Yeah. Where they have the big screen, and you can see that the fixtures here are all LED, or all halogens, and it's old technology. It's so funny to see it that way. And essentially the cycles of lighting the ceiling to reinforce your circadian rhythm, because it's a 24/7 facility. So 2 hours after lunch on your night shift, you're going to be the sleepiest. So that's when we go, wake up, and then it cycles through. And that's the idea of infusing the right amount of light at the right time based on your physiological information. Not that 2 o'clock we're going to turn it up. Because there's some people who don't eat breakfast and essentially eat at 11. So you can't make those assumptions till you have the physiological information. Here, because it's a contained space, you can't really leave your desk till it's lunchtime, which could be at 2 in the morning because of the night shift. You could actually do that. But if you have an office where people come and go, then it's not a panacea for everything, and it's not just a solution. You say, hey, just turn the lights up to blue, which is what happens quite often now as analysis of circadian light. It's we'll make it blue in the morning. Moving on to lamps and fixtures. I'm going to speed it up just a bit. I'm going to jump the first three because they pretty much don't exist anymore for the most part, and talk about LEDs, fixtures, and material safety. How many of you know that LEDs give out radio frequencies and EMFs?
Our fixtures are rated
Right.
to prevent that.
Say that again?
Our fixtures are actually designed with a grid in place that absorbs those EMF emissions so they don't interfere with medical equipment in the hospital.
Yes,
But
so those filters are, but that's in a very specialized environment.
Yeah,
Exactly. You're following great international practice in doing that, and thank you for bringing that up. But in general, if I'm using a downlight, how many? There aren't many fixtures that come with those filters.
Yeah, it's a medical grade filter.
Yeah, exactly. So if you start talking about medical grade filters that will go into what's now a $120 downlight, that ain't gonna happen,
That's
right? Or somebody's losing money on it. So, right? And because they create radio frequencies and EMFs, you guys know what EMFs are? Electromagnetic fields, EMFs. So those both contribute. They have a substantial impact on your health in how your body responds to it. Those of you who were doing lighting in the 90s, you would remember that we used to have this big problem with the halogens buzzing. Those of you were, right? You know, and the thing was that the transformers and the filaments were together doing this tango, and people used to go crazy just hearing that. You know, and if you were prone to epilepsy, you know, and if you went down to 35 to 38 hertz, you were triggering an episode. And in the same manner, if you drop it down, you know, I mean, you guys know about frequencies. If you drop it down to, say, 7.83, that's called the Schumann resonance, which they put in the NASA ships so that the astronauts stay grounded. If you take it further down to 2 to 3 hertz, it triggers euphoria. So we know that frequency has an impact on it. I mean, there's plenty of information which, you can just Google that. That frequency has a tremendous impact on you as a human being, your body, right? Right? I mean, if you guys go to a club and they're playing that, if the DJ knows to play that frequency of 2 to 3 hertz, it's amazing what kind of euphoria it triggers. You know, so the good DJs, they know how to do that. You know, that they would do the 2 to 3 hertz because it just makes people really happy. You know, so 7.83, NASA is introducing Schumann. It's called the Schumann resonance, the Schumann wavelength, into the spaceships. Why are they doing that? So, point is, if you keep looking at the studies on hertz levels and wavelengths, you know that it has an impact on your body because we, as an organism, each of our organs has a certain frequency. You know, so if we get into another class that I teach, which is on ancient building sciences, we can talk a little bit more about how the analysis is done and so on. But enough, suffice to say that LEDs are not harmless. You know, they're not harmless. Everybody's excited by the size and the output, but we are forgetting that beyond the output, what's actually happening behind the fiction? What's the orchestra that's playing behind? You know, and that's where the analysis, you know. So on the well standards in the fixtures, there's a whole conversation about lamp shielding, glare minimization, and mercury limitation, which it's good to know that, you know, it's not just about you know, the visual light, but you have to start looking at it as in componentry, as a component approach. The body that you see on the side is from the well building standards, kind of showing which parts of the body it impacts. Right? And now we're going to talk about the next part of the conversation, which is about controls. Now, controls, which are lighting controls for LEDs, produce flicker and using PWM, which is pulse width modulation. The immediate risks are the seizures and less specific neurological symptoms, including headaches, dizziness, and general malaise. And delayed risks are migraines and eye strain. So why does it happen? Do we know? Why do we have these kind of frequencies coming out? No? Because we run all the electrical circuits are on an AC, alternating current, right? It's AC. The LEDs require DC. So somewhere along the line, you got to take this big wave of the sine wave that's coming at you, and you got to go stop, go in a straight line. So wherever that box is, which tells it to go in a straight line, direct current, that's got a lot of energy activity happening. Clearly, because it's a shock absorber for the wave and making it go straight. You know? So you get a curly noodle and it goes straight. So how's that made? You know? Whatever's making this, which is called a driver, has a lot of activity, you know, energy activity. So what that means is that it has to let it out if you don't have ways of absorbing it. Now, in medical healthcare facilities, there are filters that are built for that, so that you can dampen the frequencies coming out. But remember, guys, we are not living in a hospital, thankfully, right? Nobody wants to live in a hospital. You don't want to live in a hospital or deal with lawyers, right? Two things. Doctors and lawyers. There's another thing. Anyways, two I remember.
Texas.
Huh?
I was gonna say lobbyists.
Politicians.
Let's start a list.
Oh, yes, yeah. That's a good one. Anyways, what was I saying? About,
No one wants to live in a hospital.
nobody wants to live in a hospital. Thank you very much. So, in a regular environment, how are we actually handling this? That information is not mainstream. It's not, you know, and your driver is a very important contributor to, you know, making spaces not healthy. Now, how do you define that? Well, I don't want to go off on a tangent and talk about other things that are happening with sprinkler pipes and this and that, and you know, the Gaussian fields that are created. But very simply put, if your driver is not contained within a good housing, or if it's made out of plastic, right, you're shit out of luck, because you won't even know, right? And you'll spend years in that space, and you wake up one day and go, wait, you know, how did I age like this? You know, or something like that. Yeah. But information exists to say that it's not healthy to have that. So what do? You know? So I was saying, if the lamp fixture is plastic, it does not block transmission. So what do? You know, using of screened cables, screening the cables, because those are the ones that create electric fields, is very critical. How do you screen a cable? You need to sheath it with a special material. Oh, is it that expensive? No, it's really not. It's just one step that needs to be introduced into the specifications so that that can be done, right? We are not in a hospital. It happens in a hospital, you know, that if you're running line voltage and if it's got certain kind of harmonics, it's being isolated and then sheathed, right? But in a regular building, you know, the cable systems have to be sheathed, because you can just download an app on your Android, I don't know if it's an iPhone, which is measuring Gaussian magnetic fields, you know, and you start seeing where the Gaussian fields, just see when the train comes in, when you take the subway back today, see what happens when the train is coming in, you know, and when the train revs, what does it do? Where's this energy going, guys? So what I'm saying is, can't address the MTA and the bigger picture, you know, system. But in our field, what we can do is create filters and layers that can reduce these electric fields. Furthermore, you can add materials and crystals such as orgonite, you know, that often helps in absorbing these energies. Yeah, right? We spoke about the RFI as well. The RFI is an audible buzzing noise. It can cause flickering of lights, trigger headaches, migraines, fatigue, epilepsy. And what do? Block harmful magnetic and electronic energy fields, right? Now, we're just going to jump a few points because I'm running out of time here. The wireless controls. Why wireless? The first question would be, well, wait, aren't we talking about radio frequencies and EMFs? But if you're doing wireless controls, isn't that the same thing? Actually, it's not, because it's in a totally different part of the spectrum. You know, it's in a totally different part of the spectrum, which is the wireless control. So one of the things that we've been researching and seems to be working very well is that you eliminate the need for control wiring. But thanks for coming. Need for control wiring and go wireless. Yeah. So again, yeah, let's talk about biophilia, which is how many of you are familiar with biophilia? It's basically working with nature, with the cycles of nature, and trying to be responsive from how nature would work. That's my definition. Dictionary definition may be different, but basically, you know, it's about being in sync, right? So there are three parts to it: incorporate, interact, and innovate. And just going through, you know, first is what is called the nature incorporation. is a biophilia plan that includes a description of how the project incorporates nature through the following. This is from the wellness standards, so there's a lot of credence that's being given to this even in the systems and standards that exist, is that can you use environmental elements, lighting and space layout to get the biophilia point number 88 on the well standards. The second one is pattern incorporation that includes a description of how nature's patterns will be incorporated throughout the design, right? So that's not just lighting. That could be a choice of materials as well, right? For human-nature interactions, that's the third part of it, which is within the building and within the project boundary, which is external to the building, right? So why should we do this? Because disconnection from natural environments can negatively affect your mental health. Appropriate lighting aids in reducing stress, increasing tranquility and responding to the desire, appropriate lighting aids in that to the desire of contact with nature. The movement of light over time works very well in kind of reinforcing the biophilic patterns, and using natural patterns such as cloud movement, ocean waves and foliage patterns often helps. Not an easy conversation to have with architects because there are notions about what the interior should look like. So if I'm going to tell you, like, give me some foliage patterns and this, it's not a tiki, what's it called, a tiki bar, right? That is, you give them foliage, it's not, right? So those are the responses that may happen. It's happened with us that we've tried to get foliage in, we've tried to get patterns in, right? Dampening patterns in, etc. And it has met with resistance because it's going into an interior design element, which is a more holistic approach. But I think in the architectural dialogue, it doesn't work with the style, if you would. But it's definitely gives you food for thought that there could be moments within architecture where you could create these spaces. Like we were saying that we are trying to create these vestibules of light where you actually go through them to enter a space, and they have superchroma, which is color and movement, to reinforce the use of natural patterns here. So some few images of some projects that we've done where we're trying to do that. This was project with using fireflies as providing the it's not a deep UV, but it's definitely in the blue part of the very blue part of the spectrum. Another project that I did here in New York City many moons ago, where we're trying to mimic water, so it's blue on blue on blue. Here, this is in Hong Kong, where we were looking at water bubbles as you come up. This is closer here, where we're trying to do a stitch. This is in Bushwick, which is in Williamsburg, just down the road. Trying to do a staggered pattern of pathway lights culminating in an uplit canopy. Resorts, trying to work with natural rhythms. And then this one thing that we've been doing a lot of recently, which is moonlighting. We're doing that at Port Authority Bus Terminal and a few other places where essentially we take a light fixture which is mounted up on the roof. We've gone as far up as 240 meters, which is 750 feet. It's a tall building, and able to shoot down beams of light which mimic, so this is biomimicry in a way, the moon. So you cluster them together and you give a tight enough beam that you get moonlight down on the ground level. So thereby taking away all the lollipops that are street lights, pole lights that are put in the landscape, or the borders, right? So this is actually on the Upper West Side, a project for a public agency where we were lighting this from above. That's actually Justin who's taking the photograph from above. I'm down there, you know. But you can see how the light actually travels down, you know. A detail that can work for it, which is a retractable arm, so that maintenance is not an issue. You know, it looks like this. This is a photo from Port Authority bus terminal where we're doing this. You know, this is another example of moonlighting a whole plaza, and you can see that that's also moonlighting down on the trees, so that you create this biophilia at the bottom. Biophilic moons bottom. It works very successfully if you know, you work out the shielding and the distribution. What you see here is the shadow from the trees, but that's the light. So the trees are right here, you know. So if you can see that hardest shadow, you know that the light is reaching there. I mean, you know, the old trick is put your hand out and see where the light's coming from it, you know. Horizon light, you know, trying to again work with some biophilic responses for a project with KPF overseas. The whole thing about if you guys sail, you know, and if you're getting nauseous, you're told to look out at the horizon to balance your inner ear and etc. So we kind of took that cue and started developing details that in regular architectural parlance, it's a linear fixture. So what? But the idea was that you're creating that kind of you know, response right there. A unitized system here. So it's unitized into the. And in the next 3 minutes, I'm going to just quickly go through. This is the research I was talking about for women night shift nurses, but I want to just go to the light therapies. Now, this is what I was referring to earlier. A lot of this work actually happens in not so much in the United States, but overseas, right? And I'm part of a group called the International Light Association, where they focus intently on using the characteristics of light to help with therapy and color. So this is laser needle acupuncture. So you're using colored light to actually treat ailments. Then the other thing is, which is the ABS and brain laterality, which is the two sides of the brain are, you know, you're exposing it to different colors. You're exposing your two eyes to different colors successively while listening to what's called alternating bilateral sound. So what that does is that it's really helps in stress reduction and also you know, create basically the, you know, people say I'm a left brain kind of person, I'm a right brain kind of person. The theory is that there is no left and right brain. You know, we are all full brain people. The reason that we become left and right brain is because stress introduces this big divide between the left and the right. So the left and the right don't talk to each other because you're stressed. So if you take plunger, if you would, and just plow through it, you know, you clean it up. And the way you do it is using light therapy and alternating bilateral sound, together or by itself. Light therapy is essentially, how do you say that? It's giving you wavelengths that kind of, you know, do this cross. So that's your plunger, you know, going across like that. I'm losing you guys, I'm sorry, but it actually works. Then there is what's called the super light, which is the chroma light, super chroma light, where you are, this is done by a Russian scientist mentioned in the previous slide, and then Tina Karu, who's Finnish, and Karl Reiber, who's Swedish. They make this thing where you put your head in and expose yourself to a color that, how do you say, depending on the ailment, based on your analysis, not just, you could just walk in and try to be happy. But it helps with that. Then there is this that we did in our gallery as part of Archtober last week, where you're using strobing light, not color light. The strobing light is essentially that you're sitting there with your eyes closed, and the light is strobing at a certain frequency, which triggers different parts of your body, you know. So it's again a very successful light therapy, but not with color, but just strobing, you know. And some people have psychedelic experiences with it. It's all natural. There's no, you know, you're not doing the other stuff for that. But it's really about connecting with the parts that need to be addressed. So even if you don't tell the light that what's the problem, because it works with your brain, and there are 3 types of waves: alpha, beta, and delta waves, that it actually gives signals towards addressing that, you know. And we've done this in the gallery here, the space here, about 4 times now, and every time I'm blown away by what people say after the light. So maybe about 50 people here that have gone through this light. All right, so some of the references that we use to, you know, use for this presentation. And thank you for coming. I hope parts of the information were not too much over the top, and I'm very happy to answer questions on it. Right on time?
So when you're designing for projects and you're looking at circadian responsiveness, what kind of measures do you take to give them basically a physiological screening?
What kind of measures do I take? We don't take any.
You don't take any.
We don't do that. Not really equipped, certified, or have the skill set for it. You know, that's really connecting to a more medical inquiry, which then can be filtered. So we don't do any tests, you know, on that. In fact, we do, to be very straight with you, this whole circadian thing is a little nauseating for me. So I kind of am able to do what may be required, but I don't have, I've not put my everything behind it and said, that's it, stop doing everything else, let's just do this. So, to answer your question, if somebody was, if they required that, we haven't had that situation, that's it, right? If they required that, then I would recommend going to a medical practitioner or an alternative therapy practitioner to kind of give us, or to have a questionnaire that will answer, you know, some of the questions. Yeah.
Have you been asked to design any rooms yet for the purpose of circadian modulation or treatment or anything like that?
Say that again?
Have you been asked to design any spaces or rooms?
For circadian entrainment?
Yeah, for treatment or modulation or whatever, however they frame it.
We have worked on one project where this was long back, before this whole LED thing, where it wasn't called, where we didn't call it circadian entrainment. You know, it was essentially just going through the cycles through the course of the day with using the temporal dynamism, the time factor to the light. And that was very successful. Then the Genuity project that was done in Massachusetts, that was connected to entrainment, if you would, that, you know,
right.
because you're working on a 24/7, 3-shift thing. Yeah. Where would you, I mean, the only other place I would see like circadian entrainment being an issue would be airport lounge.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I run into being a scientist, I love the science side of it, right? I'm thinking, hey, you can use light to make people feel better, so pretty cool. But it just seems like there's always been a connection from I'll say the research piece of it, which we're all kind of interested in, and how to implement it in practice.
Right. That's the whole.
Yeah.
That's the whole conversation.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do these talks so that we can actually try to mainstream the information out there, because it can really help people. I've seen it
Oh, yeah.
help people.
without-
I have been able to do it on a few projects, but it's not an easy climb because you're really questioning the whole paradigm, and saying, okay, circadian is one thing, but let's look at it holistically. Let's look at it holistically, not for a hospital. I keep saying that because that's
Sure.
covered, man. That's covered. But why not in everyday existence?
In your office,
Yeah.
I call it a chores market. Where do people spend the majority of their time throughout a week, multiple times a week? The
Right.
grocery store, the laundry mat, places where they go and pay bills. Maybe a cell phone or like a retail store where they're gonna have to spend 30 to 90 minutes because they're waiting for service, things like that.
What do you call it? A tool?
A chores market. Like what do people
Oh,
do to
chore.
take
Yeah.
care of the chores?
Right.
That's a great phrase. Yeah.
I mean, I think there was some stuff done where, and you, folks at RPI, they were talking about the study that was done, I think, that where they tried to do something called melanopic lux. They were trying to calibrate the amount of blue light coming into a person's eye by measuring, light at various points in the room and equating it with the circadian response. And again, there was a lot of math and formalism behind it. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure how, as a lighting designer or a commercial business, would implement all of that, right? It seems like you have these kind of general trends, like your iPad goes to more yellowish light at night, right?
Yeah.
Right? It seems like we can kind of,
Night mode.
yeah, we kind of agree on those large trends, but I'm not sure if you could say, well, we're gonna have, I'll say 10-foot candles of blue light where Abhay's at, but, because I'm sitting here and this is where I sit all day, every day, I need 20-foot candles. Yeah, I don't know how anyone could possibly,
What?
make.
The well building standards have actually taken a stab at it, right? And the previous one shows the ratios, etc. But they are giving you some formulas to use, and there's a whole spreadsheet that we use to calculate your circadian stimulus, etc. But my problem with this whole conversation is that it's been hijacked by this dynamic white.
Yeah, oh yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
that's the shortcut, right? Everybody says, well, I got
It's
two
like
channels, right?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you mainstream this? Will it be a dynamic system? Well, it'll be a system that can be controlled for sure. But just saying going from cool white to warm white, and you're going to entrain your circadian, for circadian entrainment, that's ridiculous. Because there's so many other factors that can happen during the.
That's exactly right. When people do these studies, they come on, they look at they can do the control groups and the kind of before and after, they give you a questionnaire and say how you feel, and they can do all that, but the problem is no one ever understands the lighting side of it, right? Which is, what kind of stimulus are we giving? We can study the population before and after whatever it is we're doing, but, to quantify what you're doing and say, well, we gave them twice as much blue light, we didn't give it to them at the right time of day, right?
Difficult to do it.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
the laboratory is one thing, in a controlled subject study with high school students or RPI students or our graduate students there, that's one thing. But to extrapolate that into design practices within architecture is the crux of the biscuit,
Well,
as they say.
To get a healthcare provider to sign up to it is also around.
That's impossible.
Yeah,
That's
because they said,
impossible.
the back of their mind is first do no harm. And then if some patient comes back and says, oh, I know I'm not sleeping well because they gave me that blue light, in the morning or something, someone will do that, right? It is a metaphysical certainty that someone would do that, right? And so then the hospital says, well, here's how I don't get sued. I don't do it. Right?
We had a very interesting speaker here a year back, Dr. Jacob Lieberman. He wrote this book called Light, the Medicine of the Future. He wrote this in the late 80s, early 90s. This is connected to the School of Syntonic Optometry that I spoke at.
Okay.
Basically, his point was that he's been speaking about it for the last, 30, 40 years. And the pharmaceutical industry always has people in the audience,
Yeah.
to take notes on what he's saying or record what he's saying, and then to debunk what he's saying, Then there is, what's his name?
They get paid to sell you a pill every 30 days, right?
Huh?
And if this can replace a sleep pill, right,
Yeah.
you're taking money out of their pocket.
And they go kind of to the extreme, and they said till we show up on the Quack Watch. Quack Watch is a website. Till then we know that we're not doing our work properly. So there is a dichotomy there. Will the twain meet? I don't know. I haven't seen the future, but I think that our job as architectural practitioners is to find ways to mainstream this, you know, without what's the word? Without kind of being overly explosive with it. You know, so there are subtle moves that you can do in certain areas which are controlled, right? A vestibule,
Yeah, right.
you know, between
Well, the call center is a good spot, right?
call center is a good spot, you know, and chore, what do you call it?
Choice market.
Chore market, yeah.
That's very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, do it there. Do it in your laundromat.
Senior care facilities are another area that's a very big deal.
That's a very good deal, yeah.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of experience with this, working for a Swiss company for quite a while, where actually we're part of our organization in analyzing the effects in dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
That's another area where a lot of this plays into, because again, these people are isolated in interior facilities as opposed to being out and being able to see natural sunlight. They're isolated into the institution, and that's where a lot of this replication of natural daylight through artificial lighting
yeah.
has shown some benefit.
Yeah. And giving them blue light 2 hours before they wake up,
Exactly.
especially if they are patients of Alzheimer's or
Yeah,
dementia.
dementia,
Because
yes.
they're living in a cave, you need to
Exactly.
you need to sit there. You know, but then there's another study which says that take them for a drive twice a day, and that beats all the light fixtures you can buy.
What is
Yeah,
it?
but unfortunately, in a senior care facility, it's probably impractical to do, to be able to get them outside when you have maybe 100 patients in that facility. That might not be so practical.
I'm not sure why, because you can put them in a bus. But your point's well taken.
Everybody doing
Your point's well taken that it's not as easy as turning on a
We're
light bulb.
driving the bus Chester and back.
You know, it's not as easy as turning on a light bulb. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But I'm saying that with every good scientific study, there's a good counterpoint.
Yeah,
And the counterpoint is that if I take a patient who has dementia out in the morning and in the evening, like with the sunrise and sunset, right?
yeah, I mean,
You don't need the blue
nothing
light.
beats the natural.
You don't need the
natural
purple
sun.
light, you don't
Yeah.
need to trigger any other kind of lighting system. Now, okay, you could be living in Norway and you don't have that option of getting that much light, you know? Yes. So the whole connect with the northern, countries becomes more relevant. But the point I'm really trying to make is that there are all these solutions, right? And to what you were saying, you know, pharmaceutical industry, etc. I'm trying to stay clear of the pharmaceutical industry. I'm just
Sure.
trying to focus on the architectural,
Sure.
field and talk about it and see what we can do. Like, maybe that, 50% blue and 150% blue, maybe that helps in a vestibule. We're designing something with the DDC. We call it, it's basically a health pod which is going to be installed in parks with a landscape architect, where we're giving you super chroma light and alternating bilateral sound, and you lie down and you sit under this geodesic thing in, say, Astoria Park, in Socrates Park up there, or Prospect Park, or whatever, and you dismantleable, you go there, you sit there, and now you're doing ABS, alternating bilateral sound, super chroma, and doing that for public health.
Yeah.
Creating equity and connection with the community. So the idea is that such conversations trigger more ideas which
Sure.
can, be mainstream.
It's a toolbox of solutions that could possibly be implemented.
Right. And at least you shed some light on it, no pun intended.
Yeah, right.
Well, and if you do have this kind of broad trend of, less blue at night, more blue in the morning, if you can start to track public health over that, or track health in a building.
How would you do that?
Yeah, I mean,
I could
it's
eat a double cheeseburger
Yeah,
and
right.
negotiate it and say, well, it was a blue light. Bullshit.
That's,
It wasn't.
so that's exactly the problem, is it always comes down to doing these control groups, right? And that's where all these medical studies are based, is how do you get a good control group so you can see it? It's like, how do you prove that cell phones don't cause cancer? Well, you don't, right? So
But
it's
you know that guy in Hoboken who sued Verizon
Yeah, right, I heard that.
with the antenna tower?
Oh, no, I didn't know.
He showed
Yeah,
the wavelengths, he showed the studies done, and Verizon had to paint his apartment with that EMF deflecting paint. So, but Verizon would spend a lot of money in making sure that that doesn't come out.
Right, that's right.
Absolutely.
So anyways, I think we are out of time, so thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And you're welcome to stick around, talk more.
How do we get a copy of it?
Yeah, I'd like to get a copy of this
Did
presentation.
Matt contact you?
If you sign up on the AIA sheet, I can make an arrangement, and I can also give you my card is over here, it says, and you go, plain, that's me. If you take my card, take my card, and just shoot me a note, then you get an express copy.
Thank you.
And that covers all aspects, so then we can break it down.
You're in the neighborhood.
I am, I live just listening to them out here. So I'm sorry, it's a little bummed up because I've been like.
I always check my email. If you just send me an email, I promise I'll respond. And we can have someone who's here the
No, the address is not, so I think right now it's worked out.
then we'd be happy to supply you. It'd be my pleasure. Lovely. Hi, we're lovely to have you. Okay.
Small scale events and things like that. In fact, I'm having what I call a community light bite, where we talk about light development. And that's actually number 8 from 8 to 10
I want my the last 5 years of my life has been supporting because now I'm searching this household and we're actually
for this process. Here's my paper supporting why I want that, not
getting affected because of infected
conversation around the
Yeah,
so right now I work
and one thing again, I was mother and wife for
Well, they mentioned
years. I don't know how much pressure there is to one and that's so many different things to do. And so anything that allows people to disinfect the environment better without requiring people to do it is undoubtedly
practitioners so that we can start addressing some of the methods and needs that we're tweaking in order to address the health wellness concerns. So that way when someone says, hey, you're not a doctor, how can I trust you? I can say, you're not, but the person sitting right here next to me, that person is. So, you know, that way we're just taking everyone with a hammer and